Chapter 3, Part 1. Jerusalem, the Emanation of the Giant Albion, by Williamblake. Chapter 3, Part 1. Rahab is an eternal state. To the deists. The spiritual states of the soul are all eternal, distinguished between the man and his present state. He never can be a friend to the human race who is the preacher of natural morality or natural religion. He is the flatterer who means to betray, to perpetuate tyrant pride, and the laws of that Babylon which he foresees shall shortly be destroyed, with the spiritual and not the natural sword. He is in the state named Rahab, which state must be put off before he can be a friend of man. You, O deists, profess yourselves the enemies of Christianity, and you are so. You are also the enemies of the human race and of universal nature. Man is born a spectre, or Satan, and is altogether an evil, and requires a new selfhood continually, and must continually be changed into his direct contrary. But your Greek philosophy, which is a remnant of Druidism, teaches that man is righteous in his vegetated spectre, an opinion of fatal and accursed consequence to man, as the ancients saw plainly by revelation, to the entire abrogation of experimental theory, and many believed what they saw and prophesied of Jesus. Man must and will have some religion. If he has not the religion of Jesus, he will have the religion of Satan, and will erect the synagogue of Satan, calling the prince of this world God, and destroying all who do not worship Satan under the name of God. Will anyone say, where are those who worship Satan under the name of God? Where are they? Listen. Every religion that preaches vengeance for sin is the religion of the enemy and avenger, and not the forgiver of sin, and their God is Satan, named by the divine name. Your religion, O deists, deism, is the worship of the God of this world by the means of what you call natural religion and natural philosophy, and of the natural morality or self-righteousness, the selfish virtues of the natural heart. This was the religion of the Pharisees who murdered Jesus. Deism is the same and ends in the same. Voltaire, Rousseau, Gibbon, Hume charge the spiritually religious with hypocrisy. But how a monk, or a Methodist either, can be a hypocrite, I cannot conceive. We are men of like passions with others, and pretend not to be holier than others. Therefore, when a religious man falls into sin, he ought not to be called a hypocrite. This title is more properly given to the player who falls into sin, whose profession is virtue and morality, and the making men self-righteous. Foote, in calling Whitfield hypocrite, was making himself one, for Whitfield pretended not to be holier than others, but confessed his sins before all the world. Voltaire, Rousseau, you cannot escape my charge that you are Pharisees and hypocrites, for you are constantly talking of the virtues of the human heart, and particularly of your own, that you may accuse others, and especially the religious, those errors you, by this display of pretended virtue, chiefly design to expose. Rousseau thought men good by nature. He found them evil and found no friend. Friendship cannot exist without forgiveness of sins continually. The book written by Rousseau, called his Confessions, is an apology and cloak for his sin, and not a confession. But you also charge the poor monks and religious with being the causes of war, while you acquit and flatter the Alexanders and Caesars, and the Lewises and Fredericks, who alone are its causes and its actors. But the religion of Jesus, forgiveness of sin, can never be the cause of a war, nor of a single martyrdom. Those who martyr others, or who cause war, are deists, but never can be forgivers of sin. The glory of Christianity is to conquer by forgiveness. All the destruction, therefore, in Christian Europe has arisen from deism, which is natural religion. I saw a monk of Charlemagne arise before my sight. I talked with the grey monk as we stood in beams of infernal light. Gibbon arose with a lash of steel, and Voltaire with a racking wheel. The schools in clouds of learning rolled, arose with war in iron and gold. Thou lazy monk, they sound afar, in vain condemning glorious war, and in your cell you shall ever dwell. Rise, war, and bind him in his cell. The blood red ran from the grey monk's side, his hands and feet were wounded wide, his body bent, his arms and knees, like to the roots of ancient trees. When Satan first the black bow bent, and the moral law from the gospel rent, he forged the law into a sword, and spilled the blood of mercy's Lord. Titus, Constantine, Charlemagne, O Voltaire, Rousseau, Gibbon, vain your Grecian mocks and Roman sword against this image of his Lord. For a tear is an intellectual thing, and a sigh is the sword of an angel king, and the bitter groan of a martyr's woe is an arrow from the Almighty's bow. Chapter 3. But Los, who is the vehicular form of strong Urthona, wept vehemently over Albion, where Thames's currents spring from the rivers of Beulah. Pleasant river, soft, mild parent stream, and the roots of Albion's tree entered the soul of Los. As he sat before his furnaces, clothed in sackcloth of hair, in gnawing pain, dividing him from his emanation, enclosing all the children of Los time after time, their giant forms condensing into nations and peoples and tongues, translucent the furnaces of beryl and emerald immortal, the sevenfold, each within other, incomprehensible to the vegetated mortal eye's perverted and single vision. The bellows are the animal lungs, and the hammers the animal heart, the furnaces the stomach for digestion. Terrible their fury, like 7 burning heavens ranged from south to north. Here on the banks of the Thames Los builded Golgonooza, outside the gates of the human heart, beneath Beulah, in the midst of the rocks and altars of Albion. In fears he builded it, in rage and in fury. It is the spiritual fourfold London, continually building and continually decaying desolate. In eternal labours loud the furnaces and loud the anvils of death thunder incessant around the flaming couches of the 24 friends of Albion, and round the awful four for the protection of the 12 emanations of Albion's sons. The mystic union of the emanation in the Lord, because man is divided from his emanation, is a dark spectre. His emanation is an ever-weeping melancholy shadow, but she is made receptive of generation through mercy, in the potter's furnace, among the funeral urns of Beulah, from the Surrey hills through Italy and Greece to Hinnom's Vale. In great eternity every particular form gives forth or emanates its own particular light, and the form is the divine vision, and the light is his garment. This is Jerusalem in every man, a tent and a tabernacle of mutual forgiveness, male and female clothings, and Jerusalem is called liberty among the children of Albion. But Albion fell down, a rocky fragment from eternity hurled by his own spectre, who is the reasoning power in every man, into his own chaos, which is the memory between man and man. The silent broodings of deadly revenge, springing from the all-powerful parental affection, fills Albion from head to foot, seeing his sons assimilate with Louva, bound in the bonds of spiritual hate, from which springs sexual love as iron chains. He tosses like a cloud outstretched among Jerusalem's ruins, which overspread all the earth. He groans among his ruined porches. But the spectre, like the hoar frost and a mildew, rose over Albion, saying, I am God, O sons of men, I am your rational power. Am I not Bacon and Newton and Locke, who will teach humility to man? Who teach doubt and experiment? And my two wings, Voltaire, Rousseau? Where is that friend of sinners, that rebel against my laws? Who teaches belief to the nations, and an unknown eternal life? Come hither into the desert, and turn these stones into bread. Vain, foolish man, wilt thou believe without experiment, and build a world of fantasy upon my great abyss? A world of shapes in craving lust and devouring appetite. So spoke the hard, cold, constructive spectre. He is named Arthur, constructing into druid rocks around Canaan, Agag, Aram and Pharaoh. Then Albion drew England into his bosom in groans and tears, but she stretched out her starry night in spaces against him like a long serpent. In the abyss of the spectre, which augmented the night with the dragon wings, covered with stars, and in the wings Jerusalem and Vala appeared, and above, between the wings, magnificent, the divine vision dimly appeared in clouds of blood, weeping. When those who disregard all mortal things saw a mighty one among the flowers of Beulah still retain his awful strength, they wondered, checking their wild flames, and many gathering together into an assembly, they said, let us go down and see these changes. Others said, if you do so, prepare for being driven from the fields. And what have we to do with the dead? To be their inferiors or superiors we equally abhor. Superior none we know, inferior none, all equal share divine benevolence and joy, for the eternal man walketh among us, calling us his brothers and his friends, forbidding us that veil which Satan puts between Adam and Eve, by which the princes of the dead enslave their votaries, teaching them to form the serpent of precious stones and gold, to seize the sons of Jerusalem and plant them in one man's loins, to make one family of contraries, that Joseph may be sold into Egypt for negation, a veil the Saviour born and dying rends. But others said, let us to him who only is, and who walketh among us, give decision. Bring forth all your fires. So saying, an eternal deed was done. In fiery flames the universal concave raged, such thunderous sounds as never were sounded from a mortal cloud, nor on Mount Sinai old, nor in Havilah, where the cherub rolled his redounding flame. Loud, loud the mountains lifted up their voices, loud the forests, rivers thundered against their banks, loud winds furious fought. Cities and nations contended in fires and clouds and tempests. The seas raised up their voices and lifted their hands on high. The stars in their courses fought, the sun, moon, heaven, earth, contending for Albion and for Jerusalem his emanation, and for Shiloh the emanation of France, and for lovely Vala. Then far the greatest number were about to make a separation, and they elected 7, called the 7 Eyes of God, Lucifer, Molech, Elohim, Shaddai, Pahad, Jehovah, Jesus. They named the 8th, he came not, he hid in Albion's forests. But first they said, and their words stood in chariots in array, curbing their tigers with golden bits and bridles of silver and ivory. Let the human organs be kept in their perfect integrity, at will contracting into worms, or expanding into gods, and then, behold, what are these Ulro-visions of chastity? Then, as moss upon a tree, or dust upon a plough, or as sweat upon the labouring shoulder, or as the chaff of the wheat floor, or as the dregs of the sweet wine press, such are these Ulro-visions. For though we sit down within the ploughed furrow, listening to the weeping clods, till we contract or expand space at will, or if we raise ourselves upon the chariots of the morning, contracting or expanding time, every one knows we are one family, one man, blessed for ever. Silence remained, and every one resumed his human majesty. And many conversed on these things as they laboured at the furrow, saying, it is better to prevent misery than to release from misery. It is better to prevent error than to forgive the criminal. Labour well the minute particulars, attend to the little ones. Those who are in misery cannot remain so long. If we do but our duty, labour well the teeming earth. They ploughed in tears, the trumpets sounded before the golden plough, and the voices of the living creatures were heard in the clouds of heaven, crying, compel the reasoner to demonstrate with unhewn demonstrations, let the indefinite be explored, and let every man be judged by his own works. Let all indefinites be thrown into demonstrations, to be pounded to dust and melted in the furnaces of affliction. He who would do good to another must do it in minute particulars. General good is the plea of the scoundrel, hypocrite and flatterer. For art and science cannot exist but in minutely organized particulars, and not in generalizing demonstrations of rational power. The infinite alone resides in the definite and determinate identity. Establishment of truth depends on destruction of falsehood continually, on circumcision, not on virginity, O reasoners of Albion. So cried they at the plough. Albion's rock frowned above, and the great voice of eternity rolled above terrible clouds, saying, who will go forth for us, and who shall we send before our face? Then Los heaved his thundering bellows on the valley of Middlesex, and thus he chaunted his song. The daughters of Albion reply, what may man be, who can tell? But what may woman be, to have the power over man from cradle to corruptible grave? He who is an infant, and whose cradle is a manger, knoweth the infant sorrow, whence it came and where it goeth. And who weave it a cradle of the grass that withereth away? This world is all a cradle for the aired wanton phantom, rocked by year, month, day and hour. Every 2 moments between dwells a daughter of Beulah, to feed the human vegetable. In tune, daughters of Albion, your hymning chorus mildly, chord of affection thrilling ecstatic on the iron reel, to the golden loom of love, to the moth-laboured woof, a garment and cradle, weaving for infantine terror, for fear at entering the gate of our world of cruel lamentation. It flee back and hide in nonentity's dark wild, where dwells the spectre of Albion, destroyer of definite form. The sun shall be a scythed chariot of Britain, the moon a ship in the British Ocean, created by Los's hammer, measured out into days and nights and years and months, to travel with my feet over these desolate rocks of Albion. O daughters of despair, rock the cradle and in the mild melodies tell me where you found what you have enwoven with so much tears and care, so much tender artifice, to laugh, to weep, to learn, to know. Remember, recollect, what dark befell in wintry days. Oh, it was lost for ever, and we found it not. It came and wept at our wintry door. Look, look, behold, Gwendolen is become a clod of clay, Merlin is a worm of the valley. Then Los uttered with hammer and anvil, Chaunt, rejoice, I mind not your laugh, and your frown I not fear, and you must my dictate obey. From the gold-beamed looms, trill gentle to Albion's watchman, on Albion's mountains reach, and rock the cradle while. Ah me, that eternal man, and that the cradled infancy in his bowels of compassion, who fell beneath his instruments of husbandry, and became subservient to the clods of the furrow. The cattle, and even the emmet, and the earthworm are his superiors and his lords. Then the response came, warbling from trilling looms in Albion. We women tremble at the light therefore, hiding fearful the divine vision with the curtain and veil of fleshly tabernacle. Los uttered, swift as the rattling thunder upon the mountains, look back into the church Paul. Look, 3 women round the cross. O Albion, why didst thou a female will create? And the voices of Bath and Canterbury and York and Edinburgh cry over the plough of nations in the strong hand of Albion, thundering along among the fires of the Druid, and the deep black re-thundering waters of the Atlantic, which poured in, impetuous, loud, loud, louder and louder, and the great voice of the Atlantic howled over the Druid altars, weeping over his children in Stonehenge, in Malden and Colchester, round the rocky peak of Derbyshire, London Stone and Rosamond's Bower. What is a wife, and what is a harlot? What is a church, and what is a theatre? Are they 2 and not 1? Can they exist separate? Are not religion and politics the same thing? Brotherhood is religion, O demonstrations of reason, dividing families in cruelty and pride. But Albion fled from the divine vision, with the plough of nations inflaming. The living creatures maddened, and Albion fell into the furrow, and the plough went over him, and the living was ploughed in among the dead. But his spectre rose over the starry plough. Albion fled beneath the plough, till he came to the rock of ages, and he took his seat upon the rock. Wonder seized in all eternity, to behold the divine vision open to the centre into an expanse, and the centre rolled out into an expanse. In beauty the daughters of Albion divide and unite at will. Naked and drunk with blood, Gwendolen dancing to the timbrel of war, reeling up the street of London, she divides in twain among the inhabitants of Albion. The people fall around the daughters of Albion, divide and unite in jealousy and cruelty. The inhabitants of Albion at the harvest and the vintage feel their brain cut round beneath the temples, shrieking, bonifying into a skull, the marrow exuding in dismal path. They flee over the rocks bonifying. Horses, oxen feel the knife. And while the sons of Albion, by severe war and judgment, bonify, the hermaphroditic condensations are divided by the knife, and the obdurate forms are cut asunder by jealousy and pity. Rational philosophy and mathematic demonstration is divided in the intoxications of pleasure and affection. 2 contraries war against each other in fury and blood, and Los fixes them on his anvil, incessant his blows. He fixes them with strong blows, placing the stones and timbers to create a world of generation from the world of death, dividing the masculine and feminine, for the commingling of Albion's and Louva's spectres was hermaphroditic. Urizen, wrathful, strode above, directing the awful building, as a mighty temple, delivering form out of confusion. Jordan sprang beneath its threshold, bubbling from beneath its pillars. Euphrates ran under its arches. White sails and silver oars reflect on its pillars, and sound on its echoing pavements, where walk the sons of Jerusalem who remain ungenerate. But the revolving sun and moon pass through its porticos, day and night. In sublime majesty and silence they revolve and shine glorious within. Hand and Coban arched over the sun in the hot noon, as he travelled through his journey. Hyle and Schofield arched over the moon at midnight, and Los fixed them there with his thunderous hammer, terrified the spectres rage and flee. Canaan is his portico, Jordan is a fountain in his porch, a fountain of milk and wine to relieve the traveller. Egypt is the 8 steps within, Ethiopia supports his pillars, Libya and the lands unknown are the ascent without. Within is Asia and Greece, ornamented with exquisite art. Persia and Media are his halls. His inmost hall is the great Tartary. China and India and Siberia are his temples for entertainment. Poland and Russia and Sweden his soft retired chambers. France and Spain and Italy and Denmark and Holland and Germany are the temples among his pillars. Britain is Los's forge. America north and south are his baths of living waters. Such is the ancient world of Urizen in the satanic void, created from the valley of Middlesex by London's river. From Stonehenge and from London Stone, from Cornwall to Caithness, the 4 Zoas rush around on all sides in dire ruin. Furious in pride of selfhood, and the terrible spectres of Albion rear their dark rocks among the stars of God. Stupendous works, a world of generation continually creating out of the hermaphroditic satanic world of rocky destiny, and formed into 4 precious stones, the entrance of Beulah. For the veil of Vala, which Albion cast into the Atlantic deep to catch the souls of the dead, began to vegetate and petrify around the earth of Albion, among the roots of his tree. This Los formed into the gates and mighty wall between the oak of weeping and the palm of suffering, beneath Albion's tomb. Thus, in the process of time, it became the beautiful mundane shell, the habitation of the spectres of the dead, and the place of redemption and of wakening again into eternity. The 4 universes around the mundane egg remain chaotic. One to the north, Urthona; one to the south, Urizen; one to the east, Louva; one to the west, Tharmas. They are the 4 Zoas that stood around the throne divine: Verulam, London, York and Edinburgh, their English names. But when Louva assumed the world of Urizen southward, and Albion was slain upon his mountains and in his tent, all fell toward the centre, sinking downwards in dire ruin. In the south remains a burning fire, in the east a void, in the west a world of raging waters, in the north solid darkness, unfathomable, without end. But in the midst of these is built eternally the sublime universe of Los and Enitharmon. And in the north gate, in the west of the north, toward Beulah, Cathedron's looms are builded, and Los's furnaces in the south. A wondrous golden building, immense with ornaments sublime, is bright Cathedron's golden hall, its courts, towers and pinnacles. And one daughter of Los sat at the fiery reel, and another sat at the shining loom, with her sisters attending around. Terrible their distress, and their sorrow cannot be uttered. And another daughter of Los sat at the spinning wheel, endless their labour with bitter food, void of sleep. Though hungry they labour, they rouse themselves anxious, hour after hour, labouring at the whirling wheel. Many wheels, and many lovely daughters sit weeping. Yet the intoxicating delight that they take in their work obliterates every other evil. None pities their tears, yet they regard not pity, and they expect no one to pity. For they labour for life and love, regardless of any one but the poor spectres that they work for. Always incessantly they are mocked by every one that passes. They regard not, they labour, and when their wheels are broken by scorn and malice, they mend them, sorrowing with many tears and afflictions. Other daughters weave on the cushion and pillow network fine, that Rahab and Tirzah may exist and live and breathe and love. Ah, that it could be as the daughters of Beulah wish. Other daughters of Los, labouring at looms less fine, create the silkworm and the spider and the caterpillar, to assist in their most grievous work of pity and compassion. And others create the woolly lamb and the downy fowl, to assist in their work. The lamb bleats, the sea-fowl cries. Men understand not the distress and the labour and sorrow that in the interior worlds is carried on in fear and trembling, weaving the shuddering fears and loves of Albion's families. Thunderous rage the spindles of iron, and the iron dye-stuff maddens in the fury of their hands, weaving in bitter tears the veil of goat's hair, and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen. The clouds of Albion's druid temples rage in the eastern heaven, while Los sat terrified, beholding Albion's spectre, who is Luvah, spreading in bloody veins in torments over Europe and Asia. Not yet formed, but a wretched torment, unformed and abysmal in flaming fire. Within the furnaces of divine vision appeared on Albion's hills, and often walking from the furnaces in clouds and flames among the druid temples and the starry wheels, gathered Jerusalem's children in his arms, and bore them like a shepherd in the night of Albion which overspread all the earth. I gave thee liberty and life, O lovely Jerusalem, and thou hast bound me down upon the stems of vegetation. I give thee sheep walks upon the Spanish mountains, Jerusalem. I give thee Priam's city and the isles of Grecia lovely. I gave thee Hand and Schofield and countries of Albion. They spread forth like a lovely root into the garden of God. They were as Adam before me, united into one man. They stood in innocence, and their skyey tent reached over Asia to Nimrod's tower, to Ham and Canaan, walking with Mizraim upon the Egyptian Nile, with solemn songs to Grecia and to sweet Hesperia, even to great Chaldea and Tessinga. Follow thee as a shepherd by the 4 rivers of Eden. Why wilt thou rent thyself apart, Jerusalem, and build this Babylon, and sacrifice in secret groves among the gods of Asia, among the fountains of pitch and nitre? Therefore thy mountains are become barren, Jerusalem, thy valleys plains of burning sand, thy rivers waters of death. Thy villages die of the famine, and thy cities beg bread from house to house, lovely Jerusalem. Why wilt thou deface thy beauty and the beauty of thy little ones, to please thy idols in the pretended chastities of uncircumcision? Thy sons are lovelier than Egypt or Assyria. Wherefore dost thou blacken their beauty by a secluded place of rest, and a peculiar tabernacle, to cut the integuments of beauty into veils of tears and sorrows, O lovely Jerusalem? They have persuaded thee to this, therefore their end shall come, and I will lead thee through the wilderness in shadow of my cloud, and in my love I will lead thee, lovely shadow of sleeping Albion. This is the song of the Lamb, sung by slaves in evening time. But Jerusalem faintly saw him closed in the dungeons of Babylon. Her form was beheld by Beulah's daughters, but all within unseen. She sat at the mills, her hair unbound, her feet naked, cut with the flints. Her tears run down, her reason grows like the wheel of hand, incessant, turning day and night without rest. Insane she raves upon the winds, hoarse, inarticulate. All night Vala hears, she triumphs in pride and holiness to see Jerusalem deface her lineaments with bitter blows of despair, while satanic holiness triumphed in Vala, in a religion of chastity and uncircumcised selfishness, both of the head and heart and loins, closed up in moral pride. But the divine Lamb stood beside Jerusalem. Oft she saw the lineaments divide, and oft the voice heard, and oft she said, O Lord and Saviour, have the gods of the heathen pierced thee? Or hast thou been pierced in the house of thy friends? Art thou alive, and livest thou evermore? Or art thou not but a delusive shadow, a thought that liveth not? Babel mocks, saying, there is no God, nor Son of God. That thou, a human imagination, a divine body, art all a delusion. But I know thee, O Lord, when thou risest upon my weary eyes, even in this dungeon and this iron will, the stars of Albion cruel rise. Thou bindest to sweet influences, for thou also sufferest with me, although I behold thee not. And although I sin and blaspheme thy holy name, thou pitiest me, because thou knowest I am deluded by the turning mills, and by these visions of pity and love, because of Albion's death. Thus spake Jerusalem, and thus the divine voice replied, Mild shade of man, pitiest thou these visions of terror and woe? Give forth thy pity and love, fear not, lo, I am with thee always. Only believe in me, that I have the power to raise from death thy brother who sleepeth in Albion. Fear not, trembling shade. Behold, in the visions of Elohim Jehovah, behold Joseph and Mary, and be comforted, O Jerusalem, in the visions of Jehovah Elohim. She looked and saw Joseph the carpenter in Nazareth, and Mary his espoused wife. And Mary said, If thou put me away from thee, dost thou not murder me? Joseph spoke in anger and fury, Should I marry a harlot and an adulteress? Mary answered, Art thou more pure than thy Maker? Who forgiveth sins, and calls again her that is lost? Though she hates, he calls her again in love. I love my dear Joseph, but he driveth me away from his presence. Yet I hear the voice of God in the voice of my husband. Though he is angry for a moment, he will not utterly cast me away. If I were pure, never could I taste the sweets of the forgiveness of sins. If I were holy, I never could behold the tears of love, of him who loves me in the midst of his anger in the furnace fire. Ah, my Mary, said Joseph, weeping over and embracing her closely in his arms, doth he forgive Jerusalem, and not exact purity from her who is polluted? I heard his voice in my sleep, and his angel in my dream, saying, Doth Jehovah forgive a debt only on condition that it shall be paid? Doth he forgive pollution only on conditions of purity? That debt is not forgiven. That pollution is not forgiven. Such is the forgiveness of gods, and the moral virtues of the heathen, whose tender mercies are cruelty. But Jehovah's salvation is without money and without price, and in the continual forgiveness of sins, in the perpetual mutual sacrifice in great eternity. For behold, there is none that liveth that sinneth not. In this is the covenant of Jehovah. If you forgive one another, so shall Jehovah forgive you, that he himself may dwell among you. Fear not then to take thee Mary thy wife, for she is with child by the Holy Ghost. Then Mary burst forth into song. She flowed like a river of many streams in the arms of Joseph, and gave forth her tears of joy like many waters, and emanating into the gardens and palaces are upon the Euphrates, and to the forests and floods and animals wild and tame, from Gihon to Hiddekel, and to cornfields and villages and inhabitants, upon Pison and Arnon and Jordan. And I heard the voice among the reapers, saying, Am I Jerusalem the lost adulteress? Or am I Babylon come up to Jerusalem? And another voice answered, saying, Does the voice of my Lord call me again? Am I pure through his mercy and pity? Am I become lovely as a virgin in his sight, who am indeed a harlot, drunken with the sacrifice of idols? Does he call her pure as he did in the days of her infancy, when she was cast out to the loathing of her person? The Chaldean took me from my cradle. The Amalekite stole me away from his camels, before I had ever beheld with love the face of Jehovah, or known that there was a God of mercy. O mercy, O divine humanity, O forgiveness and pity and compassion! If I were pure, I would never have known thee. If I were unpolluted, I would never have glorified in thy holiness, or rejoiced in thy great salvation. Mary leaned side against Jerusalem. Jerusalem received the infant into her hands in the visions of Jehovah. Times passed on. Jerusalem fainted over the cross and sepulchre. She heard the voice, Wilt thou make Rome thy patriarch druid, and the kings of Europe his horsemen? Man in the resurrection changes his sexual garments at will. Every harlot was once a virgin, every criminal an infant love. Repose on me till the morning of the grave. I am thy life. Jerusalem replied, I am an outcast. Albion is dead. I am left to the trampling foot and the spurning heel. A harlot I am called. I am sold from street to street. I am defaced with blows, and in the dirt of the prison. And wilt thou become my husband, O my Lord and Saviour? Shall Vala bring thee forth? Shall the chaste be ashamed also? I am the maternal line. I behold the seed of the woman, Cainah and Ada, and Zillah and Naamah, wife of Noah, Shu'ah's daughter, and Tamar and Rahab the Canaanites, Ruth the Moabite, and Bathsheba, and the daughters of Heth, Naamah the Ammonite, Zebeah the Philistine, and Mary. These are the daughters of Vala, mother of the body of death. But thy Magdalene, behold thy spiritual risen body. Shall Albion arise? I know he shall arise on the last day. I know that in my flesh I see God. But emanations are weak, they know not whence they are, nor whither tend. Jesus replied, I am the resurrection and the life. I die and pass the limits of possibility, as it appears to individual perception. Luva must be created, and Vala, for I cannot leave them in the gnawing grave, but will prepare a way for my banished ones to return. Come now with me into the villages, walk through all the cities. Though thou art taken to prison and judgment, starved in the streets, I will command the cloud to give thee food, and hard rock to flow with milk and wine. Though thou seest me not a season, even a long season, and a hard journey and a howling wilderness, though Vala's cloud hide thee and Luva's fires follow thee, only believe and trust in me. Lo, I am always with thee. So spoke the Lamb of God, while Luva's cloud, reddening above, burst forth in streams of blood upon the heavens, and dark night involved Jerusalem, and the wheels of Albion's sons turned hoarse over the mountains, and the fires blazed on druid altars, and the sun set in Tyburn's brook, where victims howl and cry. But Los beheld the divine vision among the flames of the furnaces. Therefore he lived and breathed in hope, but his tears fell incessant because his children were closed apart from him. And Enitharmon dividing in fierce pain, also the vision of God was closed in clouds of Albion's spectres. but that loss in despair oft sat, and often pondered on death eternal. In fierce shudders from the mountains of Albion walking, and in the vales in howlings fierce. Then to his anvils turning anew began his labours, though in terrible pains. Jehovah stood among the Druids in the valley of Annandale, where the 4 Zoes of Albion, the 4 living creatures, the cherubim of Albion, tremble in the spectre of the starry harness of the plough of nations, and their names are Urizen and Luvah and Tharmas and Urthona. Luvah slew Tharmas, the angel of the tongue, and Albion brought him to justice in his own city of Paris, denying the resurrection. Then Vala, the wife of Albion, who is the daughter of Luvah, took vengeance 12-fold among the chaotic rocks of the Druids, where the human victims howl to the moon, and Thor and Frigga dance the dance of death, contending with Jehovah among the cherubim. The chariot wheels filled with eyes rage along the howling valley, and in the dividing of Reuben and Benjamin, bleeding from Chester's river. The giants and the witches and the ghosts of Albion dance with Thor and Frigga, and the fairies lead the moon along the valley of cherubim, bleeding in torrents from the mountain to mountain, a lovely victim, and Jehovah stood in the gates of the victim. And he appeared a weeping infant in the gates of birth, in the midst of heaven. The cities and villages of Albion became rock and sand unhumanized. The Druid sons of Albion and the heavens a void around unfathomable, no human form but sexual, and in a little weeping infant, pale reflected, multitudinous in the looking glass of Enitharmon, on all sides around in the clouds of the female, on Albion's cliffs of the dead. Such an appearance in Cheviot in the divisions of Reuben, when the cherubim hid their heads under their wings in the deep slumbers, when the Druids demanded chastity from woman and all was lost. How can the female be chaste, O thou stupid Druid, cried Los, without the forgiveness of sins in the merciful clouds of Jehovah, and without the baptism of repentance to wash away calumnies, and the accusations of sin, and each may be pure in their neighbour's sight. Oh, when shall Jehovah give us victims from his flocks and herds, instead of human victims by the daughters of Albion and Canaan? Then laughed Gwendolen, and her laughter shook the nations and families of the dead beneath Beulah, from Tyburn to Golgotha, and from Ireland to Japan. Furious her lions and tigers and wolves sport before Los on the Thames and Medway. London and Canterbury groan in pain. Los knew not yet what was done. He thought it was all in visions of the dreams of Beulah among the daughters of Albion. Therefore the murder was put part in the looking-glass of Enitharmon. He saw in Vala's hand the druid knife of revenge and the poison cup of jealousy, and thought it a poetic vision of the atmospheres, till Canaan rolled apart from Albion across the Rhine and along the Danube, and all the land of Canaan suspended over the valley of Cheviot, from Bashan to Tyre, and from Troy to Gaza of the Amalekite. And Reuben fled with his head downwards among the caverns of the mundane shell which froze on all sides round Canaan on the vast expanse, where the daughters of Albion weave the web of ages and generations, folding and unfolding it like a veil of cherubim. And sometimes it touches the earth's summits, and sometimes spreads abroad into the indefinite spectre, who is the rational power. Then all the daughters of Albion became one before Los, even Vala. And she put forth her hand upon the looms in dreadful howlings, till she vegetated into a hungry stomach and a devouring tongue. Her hand is a court of justice, her feet 2 armies in battle, storms and pestilence in her locks, and in her loins earthquake and fire, and the ruin of cities and nations and families and tongues. She cries, the human is but a worm, and thou, a male, thou art thyself female. A male, a breeder of seed, a son and husband. And lo, the human divine is a woman's shadow, a vapour in the summer's heat. Go assume papal dignity, thou spectre, thou male harlot. Arthur, divide into the kings of Europe in times remote, O woman born and woman nourished, and woman educated and woman scorned. Wherefore art thou living, said Los, and man cannot live in thy presence? Art thou Vala, the wife of Albion? O thou lovely daughter of Luvah? All quarrels arise from reasoning, the secret murder and the violent manslaughter. These are the spectres' double cave, the sexual death living on accusation of sin and judgment, to freeze love and innocence into gold and silver of the merchant. Without forgiveness of sin, love is itself eternal death. Then the spectre drew Vala into his bosom, magnificent, terrific, glittering with precious stones and gold. With garments of blood and fire, he wept in deadly wrath of the spectre, in the self-contradicting agony, crimson with wrath and green with jealousy, dazzling with love and jealousy immingled, and the purple of the violet darkened deep over the plough of nations, thundering in the hand of Albion's spectre. A dark hermaphrodite they stood, frowning upon London's river, and the distaff and spindle in the hands of Vala, and the flax of human miseries turned fierce with the lives of men along the valley, as Reuben fled before the daughters of Albion, taxing the nations. Derby Peak yawned a horrid chasm at the cries of Gwendolen. The stamping feet of Regan upon the flaming treadles of her loom, that drop with crimson gore with the loves of Albion and Canaan. Opening along the valley of Rephaim, weaving over the caves of Machpelah, to decide two worlds with a great decision, the world of mercy and a world of justice. The world of mercy for salvation, to cast Luvah into the wrath, and Albion into the pity, in the two contraries of humanity, and in the four regions, for in the depths of Albion's bosom, in the eastern heaven, they sound the clarions strong, they chain the howling captives, they cast the lots into the helmet, they give forth the oath of blood in Lambeth, they vote the death of Luvah, and they nailed him to Albion's tree in Bath. They stained him with the poisonous blue, they inwove him in cruel roots, to die a death of 6,000 years, bound round with vegetation. The sun was black, and the moon rolled a useless globe through Britain. Then left the sons of Urizen the plough and harrow, the loom and the hammer and the chisel, and the rule and the compass. From London fleeing they forged the sword on Cheviot, the chariot of war and the battle-axe, the trumpet fitted to mortal battle, and the flute of summer in Annandale. And all the arts of life they changed into the arts of death in Albion. The hourglass condemned because its simple workmanship was like the workmanship of the plough, and the water wheel that raises water into cisterns broken and burned with fire, because its workmanship was like the workmanship of the shepherd. And in their stead intricate wheels invented, wheel without wheel, to perplex youth in their outgoings, and to bind to labours in Albion of day and night the myriads of eternity, that they may grind and polish brass and iron hour after hour, laborious task, kept ignorant of its use, that they might spend the days of wisdom in sorrowful drudgery, to obtain a scanty pittance of bread, in ignorance to view a small portion and to think that all, and call it demonstration, blind to all the simple rules of life. Now the battle rages round the tender limbs. O Vala, now smile among thy bitter tears, now put on all thy beauty. Is not the wound of the sword sweet, and the broken bone delightful? Wilt thou now smile among the scythes, when the wounded groan in the field? We were carried away in thousands from London, and in tens of thousands from Westminster and Marybone in ships closed up, chained hand and foot, compelled to fight under the iron whips of our captains, fearing our officers more than the enemy. Lift up thy blue eyes, Vala, and put on thy sapphire shoes. O melancholy Magdalen, behold the morning over Malden break. Gird thy flaming zone, descend into the sepulchre of Canterbury. Scatter the blood from thy golden brow, the tears from thy silver locks. Shake off the waters from thy wings, and the dust from thy white garments. Remember all thy feigned terrors on the secret couch of Lambeth's Vale. When the sun rose in glowing morn, the arms of mighty hosts marching into battle, who was wont to rise with Urizen's harps, girt as a sower with the seed to scatter life abroad over Albion. Arise, O Vala, bring the bow of Urizen, bring the swift arrows of light. How raged the golden horses of Urizen, compelled to the chariot of love, compelled to leave the plough to the ox, to snuff up the winds of desolation, to trample the cornfields in boastful neighings. This is no gentle harp, this is no warbling brook, nor shadow of myrtle tree, but blood and wounds and dismal cries, the shadows of the oak. And the hearts laid open to the light, and the broad grisly sword, and the bowels hid in hammered steel, ripped quivering on the ground. Call forth thy smiles of soft deceit, call forth thy cloudy tears. We hear thy sighs in trumpets shrill, when morn shall blood renew. So sang the spectre sons of Albion round Louva's stone of trial, mocking and deriding at the writhings of their victim on Salisbury, drinking his emanation in intoxicating bliss, rejoicing in giant dance. For a spectre has no emanation but what he imbibes from deceiving a victim. Then he becomes her priest, and she his tabernacle and his oak grove, till the victim rend the woven veil, in the end of his sleep, when Jesus calls him from the grave. End of Chapter 3, Part 1. Chapter 3, Part 2. Jerusalem, the Emanation of the Giant Albion, by William Blake. Chapter 3, Part 2. Howling the victims on the druid altars yield their souls to stern warriors. The lovely sport of the daughters round their victims, drinking their lives in sweet intoxication. Hence arose from Bath soft deluding odours, in spiral volutions intricately winding over Albion's mountains, a feminine indefinite, cruel delusion, astonished, terrified in pain and torment. Suddenly they behold their own parent, the emanation of their murdered enemy, become their emanation, and their temple and tabernacle. They know not. This Vala was their beloved mother, Vala, Albion's wife. Terrified at the sight of the victim, at his distorted sinews, the tremblings of Vala vibrate through the limbs of Albion's sons, while they rejoice over Louva in mockery and bitter scorn. Sudden they become like what they behold. In howlings and deadly pain, spasms smite their features, sinews and limbs. Pale, they look on one another. They turn, contorted, their iron necks bend unwilling towards Louva. Their lips tremble, their muscular fibres are tramped and smitten. They become like what they behold, yet immense in strength and power, in awful pomp and gold, in all the precious unhewn stones of Eden. They build a stupendous building on the plain of Salisbury, with chains of rocks and round London stone, of reasonings, of unhewn demonstrations, of labyrinthine arches. Mighty Urizen, the architect, through which the heavens might revolve and eternity be bound in their chain. Labour unparalleled, a wondrous rocky world of cruel destiny, rocks piled on rocks reaching to the stars, stretching from pole to pole. The building is a natural religion, and its altars natural morality. A building of eternal death, whose proportions are eternal despair. Here Vala stood, turning the iron spindle of destruction, from heaven to earth, howling but not invisible. Her two covering cherubs, afterwards named Voltaire and Rousseau, two frowning rocks on each side of the cove and stone of torture, frozen sons of the feminine tabernacle of Bacon, Newton and Locke. For Louvain is France, the victim of the spectres of Albion. Los beheld in terror. He poured his loud storms on the furnaces. The daughters of Albion, clothed in garments of needlework, strip them off from their shoulders and bosoms, and lay aside their garments. They sit naked upon the stone of trial. The knife of flint passes over the howling victim. His blood gushes and stains the fair side of the fair daughters of Albion. They put aside his curls, they divide his 7 locks upon his forehead. They bind his forehead with thorns of iron. They put into his hand a reed. They mock, saying, Behold the king of Canaan, whose are 700 chariots of iron. They take off his vesture whole with their knives of flint, but they cut asunder his inner garments, searching with their cruel fingers for his heart. And there they enter in pomp, in many tears, and there they erect a temple and an altar. They pour cold water on his brain in front, to cause lids to grow over his eyes in veils of tears, and caverns to freeze over his nostrils, while they feed his tongue from cups and dishes of painted clay. Growing with beauty and cruelty, they obscure the sun and moon. No eye can look upon them. Ah, alas! At the sight of the victim and the sight of those who are smitten, all who see become what they behold. Their eyes are covered with veils of tears, and their nostrils and tongues shrunk up, their ear bent outwards as their victim. So are they in the pangs of unconquerable fear, amidst delights of revenge earth-shaking. And as their eye and ear shrunk, the heavens shrunk away. The divine vision became first a burning flame, then a column of fire, then an awful fiery wheel surrounding earth and heaven, and then a globe of blood wandering distant in an unknown night. Afar into the unknown night the mountains fled away. 6 months of mortality, a summer, and 6 months of mortality, a winter. The human form began to be altered by the daughters of Albion, and the perceptions to be dissipated into the indefinite. Becoming a mighty polypus, named Albion's tree, they tie the veins and nerves into 2 knots, and the seed into a double knot. They look forth. The sun is shrunk, the heavens are shrunk away into the far remote, and the trees and mountains withered into indefinite cloudy shadows in darkness and separation. By invisible hatreds adjoined, they seem remote and separate from each other, and yet are mighty polypus of the deep. As the mistletoe grows on the oak, so Albion's tree on eternity. Lo, he who will not commingle in love must be adjoined by hate. They look forth from Stonehenge, from the cove around London Stone. They look on one another. The mountain calls out to the mountain. Plinlimmon shrunk away, Snowdon trembled. The mountains of Wales and Scotland beheld the descending war. The routed flying, red run the streams of Albion. Thames is drunk with blood. As Gwendolen cast the shuttle of war, as Cambril returned the beam, the Humber and the Severn are drunk with blood of the slain. London feels his brain cut round. Edinburgh's heart is circumscribed. York and Lincoln hide among the flocks. because of the grinding knife. Worcester and Hereford, Oxford and Cambridge reel and stagger, overwearied and howling. Wales and Scotland alone sustain the fight. The inhabitants are sick to death. They labour to divide into days and nights the uncertain periods, into weeks and months. In vain they send the dove and raven, and in vain the serpent over the mountains, and in vain the eagle and the lion over the fourfold wilderness. They return not, but generate in rocky places desolate. They return not, but build a habitation separate from man. The sun forgets his course, like a drunken man he hesitates upon the Cheselden hills, thinking to sleep on the Severn. In vain he is hurried afar into an unknown night. He bleeds in torrents of blood as he rolls through heaven above. He chokes up the paths of the sky. The moon is a leprous as snow, trembling and descending down, seeking to rest on high Mona, scattering her leprous snows in flakes of disease over Albion. The stars flee remote, the heaven is iron, the earth is sulphur, and all the mountains and hills shrink up like a withering gourd, as the senses of men shrink together under the knife of flint, in the hands of Albion's daughters among the Druid temples, by those who drink their blood and the blood of their covenant. And the 12 daughters of Albion united in Rahab and Tirzah, a double female, and they drew out from the rocky stones fibres of life to weave, for every female is a golden loom. The rocks are opaque hardnesses, covering all vegetated things, and as they wove and cut from the looms in various divisions stretching over Europe and Asia, from Ireland to Japan, they divided into many lovely daughters to be counterparts to those they wove. And when they wove a male, they divided into a female to the woven male. In opaque hardness they cut fibres from the rocks. Groaning in pain they weave, calling on the rocks atomic origins or existence, denying eternity by the atheistical Epicurean philosophy of Albion's tree. Such are the feminine and masculine when separated from man. They call the rocks parents of men, and adore the frowning chaos, dancing around in howling pain, clothed in the bloody veil, hiding Albion's sons within the veil, closing Jerusalem's sons without, to feed with their souls the spectres of Albion. Ashamed to give love openly to the piteous and merciful man, counting him an imbecile mockery. But the warrior they adore, and his revenge cherish with the blood of the innocent. They drink up Dan and Gad to feed with milk Schofield and Cotope. They strip off Joseph's coat and dip it in the blood of battle. Tirzah sits weeping to hear the shrieks of the dying, her knife of flint in her hand. She passes it over the howling victim. The daughters weave their work in loud cries over the rock of Horeb, still eyeing Albion's cliffs eagerly, seizing and twisting the threads of Vala and Jerusalem, running from mountain to mountain over the whole earth. Loud the warriors rage in Beth Peor, beneath the iron whips of their captains and consecrated banners. Loud the sun and moon rage in the conflict, loud the stars shout in the night of battle, and their spears grow in their hands with blood, weaving the deaths of the mighty into a tabernacle for Rahab and Tirzah, till the great polypus of generation covered the earth. In Verulam the polypus's head winding around his bulk, through Rochester and Chichester and Exeter and Salisbury to Bristol, and his heart beat strong on Salisbury plain, shooting out fibres round the earth, through Gaul and Italy and Greece, and along the sea of Rephaim into Judea, to Sodom and Gomorrah, and thence India, China and Japan. The 12 daughters in Rahab and Tirzah have circumscribed the brain beneath, and pierced it through the midst with a golden pin. Blood hath stained her fair side beneath her bosom. O thou poor human form, said she, O thou poor child of woe, why wilt thou wander away from Tirzah? Why me compelled to bind thee? If thou dost go away from me, I shall consume upon these rocks. These fibres of thine eyes that used to beam in distant heavens, away from me I have bound down with hot iron. These nostrils that expanded with delight in morning skies, I have bent downward with lead melted in my roaring furnaces of affliction, of love, of sweet despair, of torment unendurable. My soul is 7 furnaces, incessant roars the bellows upon my terribly flaming heart. The molten metal runs in channels through my fiery limbs. O love, O pity, O fear, O pain, O the pangs, the bitter pangs of love forsaken. Ephraim was a wilderness of joy, where all my beasts ran. The river Kana wandered by my sweet Manasseh's side, to see the boy spring into heavens sounding from thy sight. Go, Noah, fetch the girdle and strong brass, heat it red hot, press it around the loins of this ever-expanding cruelty. Shriek not so, my only love, I refuse thy joys, I drink thy shrieks, because hand and hile are cruel and obdurate to me. O Schofield, why art thou cruel? Lo, Joseph is thine, to make you one, to weave you both in the same mantle of skin. Bind him down, sisters, bind him down on Ebal Mount of cursing. Malah, come forth from Lebanon, and Hoglah from Mount Sinai. Come, circumscribe this tongue of sweets, and with a screw of iron fasten this ear into the rock. Milcah, the task is thine. Weep not so, sisters, weep not so. Our life depends on this. All mercy and truth are fled away from Shechem and Mount Gilead, unless my beloved is bound upon the stems of vegetation. And thus the warriors cry in the hot day of victory, in songs. Look, the beautiful daughter of Albion sits naked upon the stone, her panting victim beside her. Her heart is drunk with blood. Though her brain is not drunk with wine, she goes forth from Albion in pride of beauty, in cruelty of holiness, in the brightness of her tabernacle, and her ark and secret place. The beautiful daughter of Albion delights the eyes of kings. Their hearts and the hearts of the warriors glow hot before Thor and Frigga. O Molech, O Chemsosh, O Bacchus, O Venus, O double god of generation, the heavens are cut like a mantle around from the cliffs of Albion. Across Europe, across Africa, in howlings of deadly war. A sheet and veil and curtain of blood is let down from heaven, across the hills of Ephraim, and down Mount Olivet, to the valley of Jebusite. Molech rejoices in heaven, he sees the 12 daughters naked upon the 12 stones, themselves condensing to rocks and into the ribs of a man. Lo, they shoot forth in tender nerves across Europe and Asia. Lo, they rest upon the tribes where their panting victims lie. Molech rushes into the kings in love to their beautiful daughters. But they frown and delight in cruelty, refusing all other joy. Bring your offerings, your first begotten, pampered with milk and blood. Your firstborn of 7 years old, be they males or females. To the beautiful daughters of Albion they sport before the kings, clothed in the skin of the victim. Blood, human blood, is the life and the delightful food of the warrior. The well-fed warrior's flesh of him who is slain in war fills the valleys of Ephraim with breeding women, walking in pride and bringing forth under green trees, with pleasure, without pain, for their food is blood of the captive. Molech rejoices through the land, from Havilah to Shur. He rejoices in moral law and its severe penalties. Loud Shaddai and Jehovah thunder above, and they see the 12 panting victims of the 12 stones of power, and the beautiful daughters of Albion. If you dare rend their veil with your spear, you are healed with love. From the hills of Camberwell and Wimbledon, from the valleys of Walton and Esher, from Stonehenge and from Malden's Cove, Jerusalem's pillars fall in rendings of fierce war. Over France and Germany, upon the Rhine and Danube, Reuben and Benjamin flee. They hide in the valley of Rephaim. Why trembles the warrior's limbs when he beholds thy beauty, spotted with victims' blood? By the fires of thy secret tabernacle, and thy ark and holy place. At thy frowns, at thy dire revenge, smitten as Uzzah of old, his armour is softened, his spear and sword faint in his hand. From Albion across great Tartary. O beautiful daughter of Albion, cruelty is thy delight. O virgin of terrible eyes, who dwellst in the valley of springs, beneath the mountains of Lebanon, in the city of Rehob in Hamath, taught to touch the harp, to dance the circle of warriors before the kings of Canaan, to cut the flesh of the victim, to roast the flesh in fire, to examine the infant's limbs in cruelties of holiness, to refuse the joys of love, to bring the spies from Egypt, to raise jealousy in the bosoms of the 12 kings of Canaan, then to let the spies depart to Meribah Kadesh, to the place of the Amalekite. I am drunk with unsatiated love. I must rush again to war, for the virgin has frowned and refused. Sometimes I curse and sometimes I bless thy fascinating beauty. Once man was occupied in intellectual pleasures and energies, but now my soul is harrowed with grief and fear and love and desire. And now I hate and now I love, and intellect is no more. There is no time for anything but the torments of love and desire. The feminine and masculine shadows soft, mild and ever varying in beauty, are shadows no more, but the rocks in Horeb. Then all the males conjoined into one male, and every one became a ravening, eating cancer growth in the female polypus of roots of reasoning, doubt, despair and death, going forth and returning from Albion's rocks to Canaan, devouring Jerusalem from every nation of the earth. Envying stood the enormous form at variance with itself in all its members, in eternal torment of love and jealousy, driven forth by loss time after time from Albion's cliffy shore, drawing the free loves of Jerusalem into infernal bondage, that they might be born in contentions of chastity and in deadly hate between Leah and Rachel, daughters of deceit and fraud, bearing the images of various species of contention and jealousy and abhorrence and revenge and deadly murder, till they refuse liberty to the male. And not like Beulah, where every female delights to give her maiden to her husband, the female searches sea and land for gratifications to the male genius, who in return clothes her in gems and gold, and feeds her with food of Eden. Hence all her beauty beams. She creates at her will a little moony night and silence, with spaces of sweet gardens and a tent of elegant beauty, closed in by a sandy desert, and a night of stars shining, and a tender moon, and hovering angels on the wing. And the male gives a time and revolution to her space, till the time of love is past in ever-varying delights. For all things exist in the human imagination, and thence in Beulah they are stolen by secret amorous theft, till they have had punishment enough to make them commit crimes. Hence rose the tabernacle in the wilderness and all its offerings, from the male and female loves in Beulah and their jealousies. But no one can consummate female bliss in Los's world without becoming a generated mortal, a vegetating death. And now the spectres of the dead awake in Beulah. All the jealousies become murderous, uniting together in Rahab, a religion of chastity, forming a commerce to sell loves with moral law, an equal balance, not going down with decision. Therefore the male severe and cruel, filled with stern revenge, mutual hate returns, and mutual deceit, and mutual fear. Hence the infernal veil grows in the disobedient female, which Jesus rends, and the whole Druid law removes away from the inner sanctuary, a false holiness hid within the centre. For the sanctuary of Eden is in the camp, is in the outline, in the circumference, and every minute particular is holy. Embracings are cominglings, from the head even to the feet, and not a pompous high priest entering by a secret place. Jerusalem pined in her innermost soul over wandering Reuben, as she slept in Beulah's night, hid by the daughters of Beulah. And this the form of the mighty hand sitting on Albion's cliffs before the face of Albion is a mighty threatening form. His bosom wide and his shoulders huge, overspreading wondrous bare, 3 strong sinewy necks, and 3 awful terrible heads, 3 brains in contradictory counsel, brooding incessantly, neither daring to put in acts its counsels, fearing each other, therefore rejecting ideas as nothing, and holding all wisdom to consist in the agreements and disagreements of ideas, plotting to devour Albion's body of humanity and love. Such form the aggregate of the 12 sons of Albion took, and such their appearance when combined, that often by birth pangs and loud groans they divide to 12, the key bones and the chest dividing in pain disclose a hideous orifice, thence issuing the giant brood arise as smoke from a furnace, shaking the rocks from the sea to sea, and there they combine into 3 forms, named Bacon, Newton, and Locke, in the oak groves of Albion, which overspread all the earth. Imputing sin and righteousness to individuals, Rahab sat deep within him hid, his feminine power unrevealed, brooding abstract philosophy, to destroy imagination, the divine humanity. A 3-fold wonder, feminine, most beautiful, 3-fold each within other. On her white marble and even neck, her heart engorbed and bonified, with locks of shadowing modesty, shining over her beautiful female features, soft flourishing in beauty, beams mild, all love, all perfection, and when the lips receive a kiss from gods or men, a 3-fold kiss returns, from pressed loveliness. So her whole immortal form, 3-fold embrace returns, consuming lives of gods and men, in fires of beauty, melting them as gold and silver in the furnace. Her brain enlabyrinths the whole heaven of her bosom and loins, to put in act what her heart wills. O who can withstand her power? Her name is Vala in eternity. In time her name is Rahab. The starry heavens were all fed from the mighty limbs of Albion, and above Albion's land was seen the heavenly Canaan, as with the substance is to the shadow, and above Albion's 12 sons were seen Jerusalem's sons, and all the 12 tribes spreading over Albion. As the soul is to the body, so Jerusalem's sons are to the sons of Albion, and Jerusalem is Albion's emanation. What is above is within, for everything in eternity is translucent. The circumference is within. Without is formed the selfish centre, and circumference still expands, going forward to eternity. And the centre has eternal states. These states we now explore. And these the names of Albion's 12 sons, and of his 12 daughters, with their districts. Hand dwelt in Selsey, and had Sussex and Surrey, and Kent and Middlesex, all their rivers and their hills of flocks of herds, their villages, towns, cities, seaports, temples, sublime cathedrals. All were his friends, and their sons and daughters intermarry in Beulah. All are men in eternity, rivers, mountains, cities, villages. All are human, and when you enter into their bosoms, you walk in the heavens and earths. As in your own bosom you bear your heaven and earth, and all you behold. Though it appears without, it is within, in your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but the shadow. Hyle dwelt in Winchester, comprehending Hants, Dorset, Devon, Cornwall, their villages, cities, seaports, their cornfields and gardens spacious, palaces, rivers and mountains. And between Hand and Hyle arose Gwendolen and Campbell, whose Boadicea. They go abroad and return like lovely beams of light from the mingled affections of the brothers. The inhabitants of the whole earth rejoice in their beautiful light. Cockburn dwelt in Bath, Somerset, Wiltshire, Gloucestershire, obeyed his awful voice. Ignoge is his lovely emanation. She had joined with Guantock's children. Soon lovely Cordelia rose. Guantock forgave and joyed over South Wales and all its mountains. Peachy had North Wales, Shropshire, Cheshire, and the Isle of Man. His emanation is Mehetabel, terrible and lovely upon the mountains. Brereton had Yorkshire, Durham, Westmoreland, and his emanation is Regan. She joined to Slade, and produced Goneril, far beaming. Slade had Lincoln, Stafford, Derby, Nottingham, and his lovely emanation Goneril rejoices over hills and rocks and woods and rivers. Houghton had Warwick, Northampton, Bedford, Buckingham, Leicester, and Berkshire, and his emanation Gwynfred is beautiful. Schofield had Ely, Rutland, Cambridge, Huntingdon, Norfolk, Suffolk, Hertford, and Essex, and his emanation is Guinevere beautiful. She beams towards the east all kinds of precious stones and pearl, with instruments of music in holy Jerusalem. Cox had Oxford, Warwick, Wilts. His emanation is Estrild. Joined with Cordelia, she shines southward over the Atlantic. Courthope had Hereford, Stafford, Worcester, and his emanation is Sabrina. Joined with Mehetabel, she shines west over America. Bowen had all Scotland, the Isles, Northumberland, and Cumberland. His emanation is Conwenna. She shines a triple form over the north with pearly beams, gorgeous and terrible. Jerusalem and Vala rejoice in Bowen and Conwenna. But the four sons of Jerusalem that never were generated are Rintrah, Palambaron, Theotormon, and Bromion. They dwell over the 4 provinces of Ireland, in heavenly light, the 4 universities of Scotland, and in Oxford and Cambridge and Winchester. But now Albion is darkened, and Jerusalem lies in ruins, above the mountains of Albion, above the head of Los. And Los shouted with ceaseless shoutings, and his tears poured down his immortal cheeks, rearing his hands to heaven for aid divine. But he spoke not to Albion, fearing lest Albion should turn his back against the divine vision, and fall over the precipice of eternal death. But he receded before Albion, and before Vala, weaving the veil with the iron shuttle of war among the rooted oaks of Albion, weeping and shouting to the Lord day and night, and his children wept around him as a flock, silent, 7 days of eternity. And the 32 counties of the 4 provinces of Ireland are thus divided. 4 counties are in the 4 camps: Munster to the south in Reuben's Gate, Connaught west in Joseph's Gate, Ulster north in Dan's Gate, Leinster east in Judah's Gate. For Albion in eternity has 16 gates among his pillars. But the 4 towards the west are walled up, and the 12 that front the 4 other points were turned 4 square by Los, for Jerusalem's sake, and called the gates of Jerusalem. because the 12 sons of Jerusalem fled successive through the gates. But the 4 sons of Jerusalem who fled not, but remained, are Rintrah, and Palambaron, and Theotormon, and Bromion, the 4 that remained with Los to guard the western wall. And these 4 remain to guard the 4 walls of Jerusalem, whose foundations remain in the 32 counties of Ireland, and in the 12 counties of Wales, and in the 40 counties of England, and in the 36 counties of Scotland. And the names of the 32 counties of Ireland are these: under Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun, are Louth, Longford, East Meath, West Meath, Dublin, Kildare, King's County, Queen's County, Wicklow, Catherlow, Wexford, Kilkenny. And under Reuben and Simeon and Levi are these: Waterford, Tipperary, Cork, Limerick, Kerry, Clare. And those under Ephraim, Manasseh and Benjamin are these: Galway, Roscommon, Mayo, Sligo, Leitrim. And those under Dan, Asher and Naphtali are these: Donegal, Antrim, Tyrone, Fermanagh, Armagh, Londonderry, Down, Monaghan, Cavan. These are the land of Erin. All these centre in London and in Golgonooza, from whence they are created continually, east and west and north and south. And from them are created all the nations of the earth, Europe and Asia and Africa and America, in fury fourfold. And 32 the nations, to dwell in Jerusalem's gates. O come ye nations, come ye people, come up to Jerusalem. Return Jerusalem and dwell together as of old. Return, return, O Albion, let Jerusalem overspread all nations as in the times of old. O Albion, awake. Reuben wanders, the nations wait for Jerusalem, they look up for the bride. France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Poland, Russia, Sweden, Turkey, Arabia, Palestine, Persia, Hindustan, China, Tartary, Siberia, Egypt, Libya, Ethiopia, Guinea, Catharia, Negroland, Morocco, Congo, Zara, Canada, Greenland, Carolina, Mexico, Peru, Patagonia, Amazonia, Brazil. 32 nations, all under these 32 classes of islands in the ocean. All the nations, peoples and tongues throughout all the earth. And the 4 gates of Los surround the universe within and without. And whatever is visible in the vegetable earth, the same is visible in the mundane shell, reversed in mountain and vale. And a son of Eden was set over each daughter of Beulah, to guard in Albion's tomb the wondrous creation. And the fourfold gate towards Beulah is in the south. Fenelon, Guion, Teresa, Whitefield and Hervey guard the gate, with all the gentle souls who guide the great winepress of love. 4 precious stones that gate, such are Cathedron's golden halls in the city of Golgonooza. And Los's furnaces howl loud, living, self-moving, lamenting, with fury and despair, and they stretch from the south to north through all the 4 points. Lo, the labourers at the furnaces, Rintrah and Palambaron, Theotormon and Bromium, loud labouring with innumerable multitudes of Golgonooza, round the anvils of death. But how they came forth from the furnaces, and how long, vast and severe the anguish ere they knew their father, were long to tell, and of the iron rollers, golden axle-trees and yokes, of brass, iron chains and braces, the gold and silver and brass, mingled or separate, for swords, arrows, cannons, mortars, the terrible ball, the wedge, the loud-sounding hammer of destruction, the sounding flail to thresh, the winnow to winnow kingdoms, the water-wheel and mill of many innumerable wheels, resistless, over the fourfold monarchy from earth to the mundane shell, perusing Albion's tomb in the starry characters of Og and Anak, to create the lion and wolf, the bear, the tiger and ounce, to create the woolly lamb and the downy fowl and the scaly serpent, the summer and winter, day and night, the moon and stars, the tree, the plant, the flower, the rock, the stone, the metal, of vegetative nature by their hard restricting condensations. Where Louvain's world of opaqueness drew to a period, it became a limit, a rocky hardness without form and void, accumulating without end. Here Los, who is of the Elohim, opens the furnaces of affliction in the emanation, fixing the sexual into ever-prolific generation, naming the limit of opaqueness Satan, and the limit of contraction Adam, who is Peleg and Joktan, and Esau and Jacob, and Saul and David. Voltaire insinuates that these limits are the cruel work of God, mocking the remover of limits and the resurrection of the dead, setting up kings in wrath, in holiness of natural religion, which Los in his mighty hammer demolishes time on time, in miracles and wonders in the fourfold desert of Albion, permanently creating to be in time revealed and demolished. Satan, Cain, Tubal, Nimrod, Pharaoh, Priam, Bladud, Belin, Arthur, Alfred, the Norman conqueror, Richard, John, and all the kings and nobles of the earth and all their glories, these are created by Rahab and Tirzah in Ulro. But around these, to preserve them from the eternal death, Los creates Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Samuel, David, Ezekiel, dissipating the rocky forms of death by his thunderous hammer. As the pilgrim passes while the country permanent remains, so men pass on, but states remain permanent forever. The spectres of the dead howl round the porches of Los, in the terrible family feuds of Albion, cities and villages, to devour the body of Albion, hungering and thirsting and ravening. The sons of Los clothe them and feed them and provide houses and gardens, and every human vegetated form in its inward recesses is a house of pleasantness and a garden of delight, built by the sons and daughters of Los in Boulahula and Cathedron. From London to York and Edinburgh the furnaces rage terrible. Primrose Hill is the mouth of the furnace and the iron door. The four Zoas clouded rage, Urizen stood by Albion, with Rintrah, Palamberon, Theotormon and Bromium. These four are Verulam, and London, and York, and Edinburgh. And the four Zoas are Urizen, and Louvain, and Tharmas, and Urthona, in opposition deadly, and their wheels in poisonous and deadly stupor, turned against each other, loud and fierce. Entering into the reasoning power, forsaking imagination, they became spectres, and their human bodies were reposed in Beulah by the daughters of Beulah with tears and lamentations. The spectre is the reasoning power in man, and when separated from imagination, and closing itself as in steel in a ratio of things of memory, it thence frames laws and moralities to destroy imagination, the divine body, by martyrdoms and wars. Teach me, O Holy Spirit, the testimony of Jesus. Let me comprehend wondrous things out of the divine law. I behold Babylon in the opening streets of London. I behold Jerusalem in ruins, wandering about from house to house. This I behold, the shudderings of death attend my steps. I walk up and down in 6,000 years. Their events are present before me, to tell how Los in grief and anger whirled around his hammer on high, drave the sons and daughters of Albion from the ancient mountains, They became the 12 gods of Asia, opposing the divine vision. The sons of Albion are 12, the sons of Jerusalem 16. I tell how Albion's sons by harmonies and concords and discords opposed to melody, and by lights and shades opposed to outline, and by abstraction opposed to the visions of imagination. By cruel laws divided 16 into 12 divisions. How Hyle roofed loss in Albion's cliffs, and by the affections rent asunder, and opposed to thought, to draw Jerusalem's sons into the vortex of his wheels. Therefore Hyle is called Gog, age after age, drawing them away towards Babylon. Babylon, the rational morality, deluding to death the little ones in strong temptations of stolen beauty. I tell how Reuben slept on London stone, and the daughters of Albion ran around admiring his awful beauty. With moral virtue, the fair deceiver, offspring of good and evil, they divided him in love upon the Thames, and sent him over Europe in streams of gore out of Cathedron's looms. How loss drave them from Albion, and they became daughters of Canaan, and hence Albion was called the Canaanite, and all his giant sons. Hence is my theme, O Lord my Saviour, open thou the gates, and I will lead forth thy words, telling how the daughters cut the fibres of Reuben, how he rolled apart and took root. In Bashan, terror-struck, Albion's sons look toward Bashan. They have divided Simeon. He also rolled apart in blood over the nations, till he took root beneath the shining looms of Albion's daughters in Philistia, by the side of Amalek. They have divided Levi. He hath shot out into 48 roots over the land of Canaan. They have divided Judah. He hath took root in Hebron, in the land of Hand and Hyle. Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun roll apart from all the nations of earth to dissipate into non-entity. I see a feminine form arise from the 4 terrible Zoas, beautiful but terrible, struggling to take the form of beauty, rooted in Sechem. This is Dinah, the youthful form of Aaron. The wound I see in South Molton Street and Stratford Place, whence Joseph and Benjamin rolled apart from these nations. In vain they roll apart, they are fixed to the land of Kabul. And Rahab, Babylon the Great, hath destroyed Jerusalem. Bath stood upon the 7 with Merlin, and Bladud, and Arthur. The cup of Rahab in his hand her poisons 27-fold. And all her 27 heavens, now hid and now revealed, appear in strong delusive light of time and space, drawn out in shadowy pomp by the eternal prophet, created evermore. For loss in 6,000 years walks up and down continually, that not one moment of time be lost, and every revolution of space he makes permanent in Bowlahoola and Cathedral. And these names of the 27 heavens and their churches, Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Manalil, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, these are the giants mighty, hermaphroditic, Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Canaan the second, Satan, Heber, Peleg, Reu, Serug, Nahor, Terah. These are the female males, a male within a female hid as an ark and curtains. Abraham, Moses, Solomon, Paul, Constantine, Charlemagne, Luther, these 7 are the male females, the dragon forms, the female hid within a male. Thus Rahab is revealed, mystery, Babylon the Great, the abomination of desolation, religion hid in war, a dragon red and hidden harlot. But Jesus, breaking through the central zones of death and hell, opens eternity in time and space, triumphant in mercy. Thus are the heavens formed by loss within the mundane shell, and where Luther ends, Adam begins, again in eternal circle, to awake the prisoners of death, with Louvain into light eternal in his eternal day. But now the starry heavens are fed from the mighty limbs of Albion. End of chapter 3, part 2.